At 6:15 a.m. on the 8th of March, 2014. On the same day MH370 disappeared. Over 20 separate eyewitnesses on the small island of Kuta Huvadu in the Maldives all saw a large jet aircraft that looked similar to MH370, flying very low over their island. To date, there still does not appear to be a rational explanation for this. Over 3 years ago, in 2021, Charles produced this video to try to outline what we think happened. Later on, Charles, 3 years later, in 2024, created another video on the Maldives that contains some additional information that has subsequently come to light. So this is part 1 of the 2 videos made on the Maldives mystery. To get the full picture, we suggest after viewing this video you also view part 2.
The purpose of this video is to see if it was possible for MH370 to have flown to the Maldives. Here is an extract of an article that debunks the possibility of MH370 flying to the Maldives. Although there were many eyewitnesses in the Maldives that claimed they saw a large passenger jet aircraft at around 6:15 a.m. local Maldivian time, who were interviewed by a correspondent from the Australian newspaper, the article states that it could not be MH370 for the following reasons. Firstly, the experts believe that there is conclusive evidence that MH370 did not fly to the Maldives. Secondly, the plane was flying in the wrong direction. It should have come from the east, but all the eyewitnesses said it came from the west. Thirdly, MH370 would almost certainly have ditched before this mystery plane was sighted at 6:15 a.m. local time. It only had enough fuel to stay airborne for 7 and a bit hours. But these sightings came almost 1 hour later. Fourthly, if MH370 had in fact stayed in the air that long, it should have flown much further. Almost to the coast of Africa, according to the international search team. So let's summarize the main reasons why it was not possible for MH370 to be seen in the Maldives at around 6:15 a.m. local time. The aircraft was only loaded with 7.5 hours fuel. And as it was seen at 6:15 a.m. in the morning Maldivian local time, flying level with the engines making a lot of noise. Then it would have ran out of fuel approximately 1 hour beforehand. The aircraft seen by the local inhabitants of Kuta Huvadu at 6:15 a.m. was in fact the very noisy domestic turboprop -8 that landed on a nearby island at 6:33 a.m. which was flight number 149. The aircraft approached the island of Kuta Huvadu from the northwest. As it was flying from Kuala Lumpur, it should have approached the island from the east. The last 4 satellite pings have BTO values that progressively get bigger. This indicates that the aircraft was flying away from the IOR satellite. However, it would need to be flying towards the IOR satellite if the aircraft actually flew to the Maldives. So we will now use our Boeing 777 simulator to fly to the Maldives and see what happens. To try to as closely as possible replicate the initial flight path as contained in the official Malaysian safety report, we assumed the following. On the segment of Kuala Lumpur to the waypoint Agari, the aircraft flew as per the airways clearance and climbed via autopilot to 35,000 feet and then maintained 0.82 Mach. From the waypoint Agari to Kota Baru Sultan, the aircraft remained at 35,000 feet. From Kota Baru Sultan to Penang, the aircraft descended from 35,000 feet to 4,000 feet. From Penang to the Maldives, the aircraft climbed back up to 35,000 feet and then cruised at Mach 0.82. We set up the simulator to match with MH370. These were: 0 fuel weight of 175,000 kilograms. 49,100 kilograms of fuel. A takeoff weight of 224,100 kilograms. Also, in order to approximate the fuel burned whilst taxiing, we held the aircraft with the engines running prior takeoff for 15 minutes at the Kuala Lumpur runway 32 right threshold. This is the flight plan we entered into the aircraft's flight management computer. The winds were fairly calm and mainly were not direct head winds, so they would not have much impact on the flight of the aircraft. These were the winds at 18,000 feet. These were the winds at 34,000 feet. These were the actual winds for the first part of the flight to the waypoint Agari. They were recorded by the aircraft's ACARS system. These were the estimated winds from Penang to the waypoint Nilan. We held the aircraft at the runway threshold for 15 minutes to simulate the fuel used whilst taxiing to the runway. The fuel now remaining as the aircraft commences its takeoff roll at 1642 UTC is 48,600 kilograms. We are now 9 minutes into the flight and are 239 nautical miles from the waypoint Agari. We now have 45,700 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 13 minutes into the flight and are 198 nautical miles from the waypoint Agari. We now have 44,900 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 39 minutes into the flight and at the waypoint Agari. We now have 42,100 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 1 hour and 7 minutes into the flight and are 23 nautical miles from Penang. We now have 39,900 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 1 hour and 46 minutes into the flight and at the waypoint Nilan. We now have 34,200 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 4 hours and 8 minutes into the flight and at our customized waypoint Mal 3. We now have 19,500 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 5 hours and 42 minutes into the flight and at our customized waypoint Mal 6. We now have 10,300 kilograms of fuel remaining. This is the island of Kuta Huvadu, where a large jet aircraft was spotted at around 6:15 am local time. However, our aircraft has arrived 2 hours and 51 minutes too early. We will now need to see if the aircraft can still remain airborne until the time it was spotted at 6:15 am local time. We are now 6 hours and 48 minutes into the flight and have flown 513 nautical miles away from where the aircraft was spotted on the island of Kuta Huvadu. We now have 3,800 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 7 hours and 7 minutes into the flight and have flown 653 nautical miles away from where the aircraft was spotted on the island of Kuta Huvadu. We now have just 2,000 kilograms of fuel remaining. This will allow the aircraft to remain airborne for only around 20 minutes. We are now 7 hours and 32 minutes into the flight and have flown 821 nautical miles away from where the aircraft was spotted on the island of Kuta Huvadu. The aircraft has now just run out of fuel. The aircraft has ran out of fuel 1 hour before the aircraft was seen at the island of Kuta Huvadu at 6:15 am local time. The table shown contains the summary of the fuel flow and the fuel remaining during the flight at normal cruise speeds. Let's summarize why it was not possible for MH370 to reach the Maldives. Point 1. We have shown that MH370 could have easily reached the Maldives but would have ran out of fuel at around 5:14 a.m. Maldivian local time. That is 1 hour prior the sighting of the aircraft. Point 2. The aircraft was seen coming from the northwest of the island. As it came from Kuala Lumpur, one would have expected it to arrive instead from the east. Point 3. It appears the aircraft seen by the inhabitants of Kuta Huvadu was the Dash 8 turboprop flight number 149 that landed at a nearby island of Thamarafushi at 6:33 a.m. local time. Point 4. The satellite shows the aircraft during the last few hours of the flight going away from the IOR satellite. This would not be possible if the aircraft was flying towards the Maldives. First we will see if it is possible by changing the speed and altitude. To make the aircraft reach the Kuta Huvadu island at 6:15 a.m. local Maldivian time. And also have an approximate 30-minute fuel reserve. We will fly the same route to the Maldives. But this time after the aircraft starts climbing up from its descent from 4,000 feet when close to Penang Airport. We will stop the climb at 15,000 feet. And set the aircraft on a maximum time duration cruise setting of 225 knots indicated airspeed. Note at that altitude that will give us a true airspeed of around 280 knots. This means that the aircraft will be burning through less fuel per hour. And this will then allow the aircraft to remain airborne for a longer time. This is the flight plan we entered into the flight management computer. That will then give us an extended flight duration. We held the aircraft at the runway threshold for 15 minutes to simulate the fuel used whilst taxiing to the runway. The fuel now remaining as the aircraft commences its takeoff roll at 16:42 UTC is 48,600 kilograms. We are now 9 minutes into the flight and are 239 nautical miles from the waypoint Agari. We now have 45,700 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 13 minutes into the flight and are 198 nautical miles from the waypoint Agari. We now have 44,900 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 39 minutes into the flight and at the waypoint Agari. We now have 42,100 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 1 hour and 7 minutes into the flight and are 23 nautical miles from Penang. We now have 39,900 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 2 hours and 5 minutes into the flight. And at the waypoint Meeker. We have 34,700 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 3 hours and 39 minutes into the flight. And at our customized waypoint Mal 1. We have 26,000 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 7 hours and 7 minutes into the flight. And at our customized waypoint Mal 4. We have 9,200 kilograms of fuel remaining. We are now 8 hours and 39 minutes into the flight. And at our customized waypoint Mal 6. We have 2,300 kilograms of fuel remaining. This is the island of Kuta Huvadu, where a large jet aircraft was spotted at around 6:15 a.m. local time. We managed to arrive at 6:21 a.m. with still 34 minutes of fuel left. We have now just run out of fuel. We have flown 148 nautical miles south of the island of Kuta Huvadu. As the aircraft was flying at low altitude, it is now ditched into the ocean. Just 4 minutes after it ran out of fuel. To summarize, it appears that if MH370 flew at extended flight duration settings, e.g. at a true airspeed of around 280 knots and at a lower altitude of around 15,000 feet, it could have reached the Maldivian Kuta Huvadu island at 6:15 a.m. local time and still have approximately 30 minutes of fuel reserves. We noticed that 8 people, mainly journalists, interviewed the various eyewitnesses that claimed to have seen an aircraft that looked similar to MH370 in the early hours of the morning on the 8th of March 2014. Note the dates shown are just estimates. These were Mark Dugain, an author, Hedley Thomas, a reporter from the Australian newspaper, Blaine Gibson, an independent MH370 investigator who visited the island once in 2015 and twice again in 2016. Florence de Changi, a reporter from the Paris Match newspaper. Sun TV Media, a Maldives TV station. Sergio Caviola, an independent MH370 investigator. Kiki Picorna, an independent MH370 investigator. And we arranged to have some of the eyewitnesses re-interviewed many years later in December 2020. Let's now go through a summary of what the various witnesses saw at around 6:15 a.m. local Maldivian time on the 8th of March 2014. Firstly, we suggest you view the video made by the Maldives TV station Sun Media about 1 year after the aircraft went missing. A link to this video can be found on our website mh370whathappened.com. Here is a summary of the video by Sun Media. This mainly covers each of the eyewitnesses who saw a large twin-engine passenger jet aircraft fly over their island of Kuta Huvadu at around 6:15 a.m. on the 8th of March 2014. Abdul Rashid. He was fishing on the beach. He was the one on the island that saw the aircraft most clearly. He said at around 6 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. he saw a large aircraft. And the plane was flying very low. It was very windy, and the wind was coming from the east. The plane went straight over his head, then tilted towards the southern corner of the island. He saw a red line near the windows. He said, "I know for sure, I can guarantee it had a red line." The windows were clearly visible. He mentioned again when it tilted it had a red line below the windows and it was very loud. When showed a photo of the Malaysian Boeing 777, he said it looked like that for sure. He sees a lot of planes. He said the ones we see are about 2 to 3 feet long. However, this one was about 6 foot long. Nasriya was in her garden. She often travels out of the country on large passenger jet aircraft due to medical reasons. So large passenger jet aircraft are not foreign to her. She thinks around 6:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. she heard a loud noise above her head. When she looked up, she saw a large white object fly over her head. It appeared to be about 5 feet long. Human Don was outside in his garden. He heard a loud noise. Then he saw a large object going very low. He has previously had seen a lot of planes traveling in that direction. But he said what I saw today was very different. The main difference was the low height and the noise it made. Normally the planes are the size of my finger and make a very low noise. After the plane was reported as missing, he noted the colors of the plane were the same. Ahmed Ibrahim was walking outside his house when he heard a loud noise. The plane was close to the Watanita Tower. It was a big plane. And it had a different sound to the air taxis. Very different. Later on, the Maldives National Defense Force and police took statements from him. Zuhuriya was in her garden. She sees a lot of planes flying overhead. This one was very different from the planes that usually fly overhead. In 2014, Zamir was the head official on the island. He did not mention whether he saw the aircraft. He said the police and Maldives National Defense Force had asked him not to share eyewitness reports of the plane with the international media, as it involved national security. He said as many people saw the aircraft at the same time, it should not be overlooked. He stated Island Aviation has confirmed that no Dash aircraft flew over the Kuta Huvadu island at the time in question. The police apparently took statements from 21 people who have claimed to have seen the plane. Note, from what we can understand, most of the people on the island of Kuta Huvadu did not see any aircraft fly over the island at that time. As it was early in the morning, a lot of people might have been asleep. However, as the population of the island was around 2,400, one might have expected that more than the 21 known eyewitnesses would have heard or seen it. One possibility could be that they were reluctant to come forward, as it appears any discussion about the sighting with foreigners was discouraged. This is the summary of the Sun Media video. The important things we learned from our trip to Kuta Huvadu is that those we spoke to assure us that a plane was sighted flying over the island on that day. We do not know if it was MH370, but we note the similarity on the information provided by those who spoke to us. We will now summarize what was seen by additional eyewitnesses that were interviewed by various other people, e.g. foreign journalists and independent MH370 investigators who visited the island. Ahmed Shiam at around 6:15 a.m. said he saw two jet engines on the aircraft very clearly. The plane was heading north to south. There was no smoke or fire, but there was steam was coming out of the engines. And also the plane flew level. He then positively rejected what he saw as the turboprop-8 local aircraft and positively identified a similar match when showed a picture of a Malaysian Airlines Boeing 777. He said he recognized from the photo the bulge under the wings. His daughter, who was with him at the time, also saw the plane. Suariya Ali saw the underbelly of the plane and with the wheels not down. She positively discounted the picture of the Maldivian -8 turboprop and positively identified it looking like the missing aircraft. Ibrahim Nasser at around 6:15 a.m. said he heard a loud noise. He recognized the aircraft as a Boeing or Airbus. The aircraft was moving fast above him. And he believed the aircraft looked similar to the missing aircraft. There were also additional eyewitnesses that were located on another island called Gata Fushi. This island is about 57 kilometers southeast from the first island that spotted a large passenger jet aircraft flying low over their island at around 6:15 a.m. local time. There were 3 witnesses on this island. Assuming the aircraft headed directly to this location, it should have taken around 8 minutes from when it was first spotted on the island of Kuta Huvadu. These are the 3 additional witnesses on top of the many from the Kuta Huvadu island. None of them previously had spoken to anyone about the sighting of an aircraft, which was sometime prior to 7 a.m. local Maldivian time. One of the ladies clearly recalled seeing a big white plane and saw the blue stripe on the tail. These witnesses were interviewed in December 2015. The first witness said she saw a large aircraft prior 7 a.m. and said it flew over and disappeared over the tree line on her island. The second and third witness also saw a large passenger jet aircraft fly over the island. One of them noticed a blue stripe along the aircraft and also some blue coloring in the tail. We decided to get someone to re-interview the eyewitnesses on the Maldives island of Gata Fushi in December 2020. This is 5 years later. Here is the information we gleaned from them.
Gaganakange Ashakan Waya Hadate. Other than why Nujat Mitakamati. Varangadupa. Roeche Kange Parafiagando Espordo, Egedungando Innan, Etereko Domino. Ihaboda Dum Hori Macab, Asduriti Kuda Nege, Hiva Gotom Hivani, Madono Kulevatara. Mahama Chebes no Hatiri, Gagana Kamedumivare. Mihaku kare bonindo miyad hingaje mi dungana ka kudi bote kam eka wara bodo icheke hem bonedindo e te hama mi hingeri gotanga bedi hama die goin hama reti
Cutting thing, Hama, Karabuna, Anna, got a sal, Sate, Hataja, Vanara, I got it by a day, Hamafina. Mage Futu, Doshi Kava, have a good to we are going to go to the Fia, going to Hama. Him boat to Nire, boat to get me on night, the Fia going to me on night, Mitana Dunda, I think. Dunda, I think. Mitan Dunga to Hamakalu, Vija container. Manginge Rajaban Krachanonka. A kangi ham. A kangi and the Bunamas putting a Miraja Vadagan lay, check it. Data Huri Tanam Fenano 80. අන්නනිකෝ දැන් බාර අඩු ඉවිගෙන් බලයාලමයි බලයාලේ හම න්දායිකෝ තිරිම්බද හාම කුලිය ඇච්චස් කියන්ගේ ගොතන් හම ඔතුවේ සමතිරි දැන් ඒ අයිසා අනෙක්කා අම්මච්චන් අරව අනෙක්කස් අඹුරාලු මබ්බුනේ වුණ ඒ මි රාජ්‍ය බයි නෝනකේ නේගේ බේරුම් බදගෙන් වල බය කම්මස් ඒලන එයාපෝට්ටන් සීදානවගෙන් කන්නේගේ දුවා බොට්ටෙන් නෝන අදෝ අර්මස් දැන් ඉවර කරන්න බලන්න දෝ ඒ බෝට් කොස්ස බන්ද එකක්
පොඩු එච්චෙන්ගේ හැම පොඩු තිරින්ව අදියා දැන් පොඩු කංගලනද තිකොප්පනේ ඉතිකොන් හැමපනේ ගොස් එකොලක් ගොස් තිරිවීර සමත් විම මංගේ දෙබේ හොරු ඉංගේ හොදකෝ දැන් හොරු වත්තර මිකුලෑස්සුරේ වමාඩු තියහනෙන්නේ ඒගේ වත්තර
The Maldives officials stated that the islanders actually saw Flight 149, which was one of the local airline's domestic Dash 8 turboprop aircraft. This does not make sense due to the following reasons. Firstly, this flight number 149 supposedly landed at the Thamara Fushi airport at 6:33 a.m., arriving from Mali airport. However, the first flight to Thamara Fushi departed Mali airport at 7:35 a.m. So it would need to go back in time to arrive at Thamara Fushi 58 minutes before it took off from Mali airport. Secondly, the others flights on the 8th of March and 9th of March 2014 to and from Thamara Fushi airport had the following turnaround times: 23 minutes, 26 minutes, 17 minutes, 20 minutes, and 18 minutes. However, this flight number 149 was apparently turned around in only 12 minutes. Although not impossible, it is very unlikely the aircraft would have been turned around so fast. Thirdly, the local inhabitants from two different islands, namely Kuta Huvadu and Gata Fushi, were all familiar with what the local domestic aircraft looked like. And they all confirmed the aircraft they saw looked totally different to the local turboprop aircraft. I.e., it looked instead like a large twin-engine passenger jet aircraft. Fourthly, the route from Mali airport to Thamara Fushi airport makes the aircraft track 39 kilometers east of the Kuta Huvadu island. And in addition, when abeam the Kuta Huvadu island, the aircraft would be approximately 50 kilometers from its destination. So most likely it would be on descent, and using typical descent profiles for turboprop aircraft, it should be at an altitude of around 7 to 10,000 feet. Not at the very low altitude as noted by the multiple eyewitnesses. We have confirmed MH370 could have arrived at the island of Kuta Huvadu when it was sighted at around 6:15 a.m. Maldivian local time and still have around 30 minutes fuel reserve. We have also established that the aircraft seen by the multiple eyewitnesses on the Kuta Huvadu and the three other eyewitnesses on Gata Fushi were virtually certainly that the aircraft they saw was not one of the local domestic turboprop aircraft, and instead appears to look like a large two-engine passenger jet with markings very similar to that of MH370. So the probability that some random unidentified large twin-engine passenger aircraft with similar markings should fly very low over both the Kuta Huvadu and the Gata Fushi islands within the possible 30-minute time slot window, over say a period of 5 years before and 5 years after the disappearance of MH370, as this is the first time ever the local inhabitants have seen anything like this, can be calculated as follows. For the 10 years time period, multiply 10 by 365 days per year. Then times 24 hours per day. And finally times 2 for the 30-minute time slots. That works out to be a 1 in approximately 175,000 chance that in that one 30-minute time slot a random large unidentified twin-engine jet passenger aircraft would fly low the two islands during that 10-year time period. Also, if you take into consideration that the aircraft seen was a large twin-engine jet with similar color and markings to MH370 and flying much lower than would be expected, that then would further increase the probability by a conservative factor of 5. This now takes the probability to approximately 1 in 800,000. So we have calculated that the probability a similar-looking aircraft to MH370 would fly low over the Maldives just within a one specific 30-minute time slot over a 10-year period is around 1 in 800,000. But now we must also take into account the fact that MH370 was a major black swan event. In other words, not like any of the other over 300 million flights that happened in that 10 years time frame. So during the 5 years before and after MH370, these were the number of flights on a worldwide basis. In all, the 194 incidents and accidents that occurred over the 10-year period. In addition, the air crash investigation teams either found out the exact reason for the incident or accident, or in just a few cases at least a very likely probable cause. The aircraft wreckage was always found. We will now list the main incidents and accidents that have occurred over this 10-year period, i.e., from the years 2009 to 2018. However, with MH370, the main wreckage and black boxes were never located over a 7-year period. Also, there is no known cause for the crash. Just a lot of speculation. For large passenger jet aircraft, this is the only time this has happened during this 10-year period. This makes MH370 a major black swan event, i.e., an approximately a 1 in 300 million occurrence. Therefore, combining the fact MH370 was a 1 in 300 million event with the sighting of a similar-looking aircraft over the Maldives, which was a 1 in 800,000 event. Then the fact that they both occurred at the same time gives an approximate probability of 1 in 250 trillion. Therefore, we believe it is reasonable to then conclude that this makes it virtually impossible that the sighting of a large passenger jet flying very low over the Maldives at around 6:15 a.m. local time on the 8th of March 2014 was not in some way connected to MH370. In other words, the aircraft seen flying over the Maldives was for all practical purposes either actually MH370 or some other aircraft dispatched to the area looking for the missing aircraft or something similar. So the probability that these 4 events could all occur can be calculated approximately as follows. The fact that the experts stated that MH370 did not have sufficient fuel to be seen at the Maldives at 6:15 a.m. does not seem plausible, as it is a very simple exercise to work out the endurance of the aircraft. We allocated a probability that this mistake could have occurred to be 1 in 1,000. We estimate the probability where a large low-flying passenger jet would be seen on the same day that MH370 disappeared to be 1 in 175,000. We estimate the probability that the authorities were unable to identify the low-flying passenger jet aircraft that looked very similar to MH370 to be 1 in 100,000. The island authorities claimed the aircraft seen was a Dash 8 turboprop aircraft flight number 149. This was totally different to the aircraft spotted, and also at that time it was on the ground at Malé Airport. We allocated a probability that this mistake could have occurred to be 1 in 100. This gives a combined probability rounded down to around 1 in 1,000 trillion. Here is the questions and answers section. Why would the aircraft fly so slow, i.e. at a true airspeed of around 280 knots, as opposed to its normal cruising speed of around 480 knots? It would need to do this, i.e. fly much slower in order to get to the Maldives, firstly at the time spotted, i.e. 6:15 a.m. local time, with still some fuel left in its tanks. And secondly, arrive at such a time that most people would assume it would have run out of fuel 1 hour earlier, as the loading sheet stated the aircraft only had 7.5 hours of fuel on board. This could possibly also help to strike out the Maldives as a possible end destination for the aircraft. The aircraft should have approached the island from the east as it was coming from Kuala Lumpur. How come instead it was spotted approaching from almost the opposite direction, i.e. the northwest? In order to arrive at the Maldives at 6:15 a.m. at first light, it could not do so if it just went straight there, as it would arrive too early. So it needed to fly a dogleg in order to arrive at the time it was spotted. In addition, arriving from an unexpected direction could also help in trying to show that the aircraft seen was not MH370. Are you saying that the aircraft seen by the estimated separate 21 eyewitnesses on Kuta Huva Do and the other 3 eyewitnesses on Gatafushi was virtually definitely MH370? No. But we believe it is reasonable to conclude that from all the evidence one cannot totally rule out that possibility. In addition, if it was not MH370, then it would seem quite possible that the aircraft seen was somehow connected to the incident. Okay, it seems reasonable after viewing the evidence that MH370 could have reached the Maldives by 6:15 a.m. local time, with a 30-minute fuel reserve. Also, it seems reasonable that on probability it would be pretty unlikely that a large passenger jet would be spotted by so many independent eyewitnesses flying so low over the islands. Would just coincide within the small 30-minute window that MH370 could be at that location. And also that the aircraft the Maldivian officials said the eyewitnesses saw was Flight 149, which is one of the local domestic turboprop aircraft. Probably never actually existed, and even if it did, its route would have taken it 39 kilometers east of the Kuta Huva Do island. But that's all very well, but what about the satellite data? It clearly shows that the last few pings showed an increasing BTO value. This means the aircraft was flying away from the IOR satellite. If the aircraft was flying towards the Maldives, the BTO value should be getting smaller, i.e. the aircraft should be flying closer to the IOR satellite. If the satellite data is correct. In other words, especially if the last few pings were actually generated from MH370 and also the BTO values have been correctly calculated, then it would not be possible for MH370 to have flown to the Maldives. Note in our other videos, if our analysis is correct, it appears there could be some anomalies with the satellite data. We suggest that you look through all our other 17 videos and then decide for yourself on the veracity of the satellite log. If you then determine that there are no issues with the same, then that would imply that MH370 could not have flown to the Maldives. There appears to be many theories relating to the MH370 incident. With regards to the sightings in the Maldives, here are just some of the possible explanations. Firstly, that all the reports etc. from the Maldives have no foundation. And also the 24 anomalies we detected with the aircraft's data, e.g. from the satellite log, ADS-B log, third-party radar sites, air traffic control transcript, and the captain's flight simulator data also all have no foundation. Then the most likely explanation is that the aircraft is located, as per the official report, somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean. Secondly, that the large passenger twin-engine aircraft seen by the multiple eyewitnesses in the Maldives was in fact MH370. And therefore it is possible the aircraft was actually ditched in that vicinity. Or thirdly, the large passenger twin-engine aircraft seen by the multiple eyewitnesses in the Maldives was not MH370. However, as it appears to be just too coincidental that this sighting happened in the very small time window when MH370 could have reached the Maldives, then maybe something like this could have occurred. The aircraft spotted was sent to the Maldives either just prior MH370 was to be ditched in order to confirm a suitable place was selected, e.g. somewhere with no ships or boats in the area that could possibly witness the ditching, or after the aircraft was ditched to see if there was any surface wreckage etc. Another option could be that a similar-looking aircraft was sent to fly over the Maldives to possibly act as a decoy. This could maybe tie up any independent investigators with additional options that could help take the spotlight off what actually occurred.
This is the end of part 1 of the Maldives mystery video. We suggest, in order to get the full picture, you also now watch part 2.
Thanks for watching. For more information, please click on the links below. Please do subscribe to our channel and click the like button and share our video.